This story will break you. Not even I expected this to be horror. Not really. It looks soft, almost harmless. The kind of story that you think you understand before it even begins. And then it does something. Something quiet, unexpected. Something that doesn't shock you, but it stays with you. And by the time you realize what you're actually experiencing, it's already too late. This video contains heavy, disturbing, mature, and dark themes. Themes including, but not restricted to, child abuse, murder, and suicide. If this is the kind of subject matter that affects you in a negative way, I suggest you check out a different video. If you are someone being affected by these kinds of events, you're not alone. There are programs and there are people who can help. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is here to help you. More information on that can be found in the description below. Moving on. Hello everyone, my name is Falcon and welcome to What Am I Watching? Today's subject is not quite what I had in mind for my comeback after being sick for so long. In fact, you might be able to hear from my voice I'm not quite ready to come back, but I had to get this one out. It's been only a matter of hours since I finished Takopi's Original Sin, and I needed to get this video made, edited, and uploaded. I hope that wasn't just the fever thinking for me. We are about to jump into one of the darkest stories I have ever read. I will be trying my best to avoid spoilers. This is not a recap video. I have no intention of retelling the story, those aren't the kinds of videos that I make. This is an essay, and I do hope that you read this one yourself. Or, as I found out during the research for this video, you can watch the anime adaptation. It's a short one, 4 or 6 episodes I believe. I haven't seen it yet, but it seems to hold up to the original well. I'll definitely be checking it out later. Now then, on with the video. So turn off the lights. Stay a while. Let's learn a few things together, shall we? When most people think about horror, they think about monsters. Jump scares and loud noises. Things that appear suddenly and disappear just as quickly. And that kind of shock, well, it can work. In the moment. But it doesn't last. You watch it, you react, and it's over. That's not horror. Not real horror. But even real horror. Horror that ends when the screen goes black or you turn the last page. Sometimes those stories don't end there. Sometimes they follow you. Takopi's Original Sin isn't horror in the traditional sense. It doesn't rely on fear the way that most stories do. There are no creatures lurking in the dark. No looming presence waiting to strike. What it does instead is something much more uncomfortable. It understands people, and it understands pain. Not in an exaggerated way, not in a dramatized or cinematic way, but in the way that feels uncomfortably close to reality. Never before have I watched something that I had to pause or look away from out of fear. Never before have I read something that I was genuinely too afraid of to turn the page, to keep going. Well, congratulations, Takopi. You are the first, and I genuinely want to thank you for that. Some people think that it's easy to look at a story like this and categorize it, to call it sad or tragic or emotional, but that doesn't quite capture it. Because sadness fades, this doesn't. It lingers. It stays with you. And the reason for this is because of what it says about people. There's no real monster here. There's no singular villain that you can point your finger at and say, now that there's the problem. Instead, you're given something much worse. A system. A system of pain. People hurting one another. Not always out of malice, but because that's what they've learned. Because that's what they know. That's what they've learned to stay safe. To avoid being hurt themselves. And sometimes, there's no one there who can stop it. It's easy to look at someone like Shizuka and ask, now what the hell is wrong with her? But that might be the wrong question. A better question might be what happened to her for her to become like this. Because when you really look at her behavior, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It builds. From isolation, neglect, from being placed in an environment where empathy isn't nurtured, where pain isn't addressed, and where harm becomes normalized. Over time, something starts to change. Not all at once, and not in ways that are always obvious, but gradually. The way she interacts with others becomes more detached, more controlled, more willing to cause harm without fully processing it. And what you're seeing isn't just cruelty. It's what happens when empathy doesn't develop the way that it should. There are moments where her perception of reality begins to slip, where what she believes doesn't quite align with what's actually happening, whether that's denial, or a way of coping, or something deeper. It shows how far things have gone, how disconnected someone can become when they've never been given the chance or the tools to understand their own pain. This is an introduction to psychopathy, an antisocial personality disorder. This story, it handles the subject all too well. Shizuka nor Marina start as monsters. They become monsters. Slowly, in ways that if you look closely enough, well, they just almost make sense. And that's what makes this story horrifying. Because if you understand how it happens, it stops feeling impossible. How do you go from the target of a bully being beaten every day, having suicidal thoughts, from giving up on life, to someone who at a moment's notice will kidnap or murder children? Based on available information regarding the creator of Takopi's Original Sin and the Ichinose family's deadly sins, a subject I might make its own video on one day, there's no public record indicating that Tizen 5 studied psychology formally. However, the creator is widely acclaimed for writing intense psychological dramas and exploring complex themes such as trauma and abuse, like that of Takopi's Original Sin, revolving around children facing intense bullying, neglect, and suicidal thoughts, attempts, and even murder. Family dynamics and memory. The Ichinose family's deadly sin explores damaged relationships and memory loss. And of course, guilt and morality. These works frequently examine how traumatic experiences shape and reshape human behavior. Throughout the story, there's this idea that things can be fixed if you just go back, if you find the right moment, if you change that moment, say the right thing, or do something different. You can just make things better. The resets feel like second chances, like opportunities to correct something that went wrong. But they don't work that way, because the problem isn't a single moment. It's the pattern. Every attempt to fix things somehow does nothing, or in some cases makes them even worse. Not because the intention is wrong, but because the underlying conditions never change. The pain is still there. The environment is still the same. The people are still shaped by everything that came before. And that's where the story becomes something else, something deeper. Because those resets, well, they start to feel less like solutions and more like repetitions. What if they're not breaking the cycle, but proving how hard it is to escape one? There's a parallel here that's hard to ignore between those resets and the way trauma moves through people, through generations. Parents and children, resets and second chances stuck in the same environment as those before them. History doesn't always repeat exactly what came before it. Sometimes it just rhymes in different forms, through different people, different generations, but often with the same outcome. Pain can get passed down, learned behavior gets repeated, an echo or a rhyme, a rhythm. And even when someone tries to do better, tries to change things, they're still working within a system that's shaped them. And that's what makes it feel so hopeless, because it suggests that sometimes wanting things to be better, well, that's just not enough. And that's where the horror really sets in. Not in what happens, but in the realization that it keeps happening, over and over again, in different ways, with different people, but again, following the same pattern. This is why the story feels like horror, even without the traditional horror elements, because it removes distance. It doesn't let you separate yourself from what you're seeing. There's no safe layer of fiction protecting you from it. The fear isn't that this could happen, it's that it already does, every day, in ways that are quieter, less visible. but just as real. I won't be getting into my life right now, but there are reasons why it's my belief that to write something like this, as well as it is written, you must have either studied or lived through examples of it. Either way, as a reader, when the story ends, it doesn't really end. Not in the way most stories do. You don't just walk away from it. You carry it through thoughts, moments, and implications. These thoughts, they stay with you. And that's something I've talked about before. The idea that the most effective horror isn't the kind that scares you in the moment. It's the kind that follows you home. It's the kind that lingers in your thoughts. That changes the way that you look at things. It makes you uncomfortable. Not because it's exaggerated, but because it feels real. Someone recently asked me if a horror movie really scared me, if it ever made me feel uncomfortable, terrified. They asked like Alien or something like that, and I really had to think about it. I grew up watching a lot of horror, and I do mean a lot of horror. Half of it, if not more, were movies about the human condition and not about traditional monsters. But then I thought of one when I was revisiting the thought of Alien. It's not particularly good, nor is it bad, but more than likely one of the only examples I have of a traditional movie monster that really scared me, long after the movie ended. I'm kind of ashamed to admit this, but there was a movie called Fire from the Sky, made in 1993. On the surface, it seems like your basic alien abduction movie. Now those are a dime a dozen. Not my thing. I tend to avoid them due to the cheesy and unrealistic nature or lack of horror. This movie, though, it got to me. It stuck with me. Gave me nightmares. Nightmares, for Christ's sake. Me! The only movie I can think of that ever really gave me nightmares. Well, other than E.T., but that's its own story. I had to think long and hard about why this movie was so effective, and I got it. It was the only one that at the time of viewing, well, it felt plausible. It felt like something that could happen to anyone, that could happen to me. No monsters or aliens running down corridors of spaceships long in the future. Nothing so far out there it became unrealistic or something that I had to subvert my expectations to. No, this one just felt so plausible. Takopi's Original Sin fits into that space perfectly. Not just because it's realistic, and not because it's plausible, but because it's something real. And like I said before, something that happens every day. Takopi's Original Sin does not try to be horrifying. It understands something fundamental, that sometimes the most disturbing stories aren't about monsters at all. They're about people. And maybe that's what makes something truly horrifying. Not that it shocks you, not that it scares you in the moment, but that it stays with you afterwards. Quietly, persistent, like something that you can't quite let go of. Most horror ends when it's over, but sometimes, some stories, they don't. Takopi's Original Sin isn't traditional horror, but it's one of the most disturbing stories I've ever experienced. Not because of what it shows, but because of what it understands. Now to something real again. This video included heavy themes. If you need or know someone who needs support, dial 988 on any phone, or visit 988.ca to be put in touch with someone. You deserve to be heard, and there are people there to listen. You're not alone. That aside, I want to thank you all for staying as long as you did. If you made it this far into the video, then I must be doing something that you like. So if you enjoy this kind of horror, the kind that lingers, the kind that stays with you, consider subscribing. Because I am one of those stories. I don't just end. I sit with you. I talk with you about things that are worth talking about, and we learn something together. Let me know in the comments below, what did you think of this story? Did you see it the same way that I did, or did it hit you differently? I would genuinely love to hear your thoughts. I want to thank you all for listening this evening, and I will see you in the next video.